You don't have to stand up on the rock, though. Okay. All right. Careful, Lorne.
Careful. God, what a surprise.
You're telling us.
Whenever a genie appears.
Because we didn't abandon, we left the place, and we're finished. But you guys, anybody have a question? Oh, by the way, I was the head of the model shop, is what it is. You shouldn't necessarily know who I am, period, because I was a lot younger too. But, I worked for about 35 years, both in Van Nuys when we first started, and then for here until I retired. So, longest job I'll ever have, 35 years or something like that.
I have a question.
What's that?
Is it true that you built the McDonald's playgrounds before you went to work for ILM?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't build the playground. What I did was I was paid to carve Khmer cheese and the Hamburglar and the hot apple turnover tree and things like that. But I didn't. I just made the originals, and then somebody else molded them and then made the parks. So that just I was. None of you people would be old enough to know there was an energy crisis in '74.
Some of us
And you could not find a job. You know, I was working in industrial design, and it just went like. So I would do anything that made some money, and that was one of the things that made some money. And I just happened to run across somebody that I went to college with. When I was investigating how they were doing, and he said, "Oh my God, Lorne, you'd be perfect. We're doing a science fiction film in the Valley, and why don't you come and see what we're doing?" So I didn't even apply for the job, and I think I was hired for 1 month, no, 2 months, and that was it. And nobody ever said, 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or anything like that. Just kept going, and I worked on about 50 to 55 different films.
What did they tell you were doing? Like when you were making those original models, what did they tell you it was for?
What did
they tell you the models were for originally?
You know what? There was no doubt about that. Joe Johnston's drawings, he was the art director. There were incredible drawings. And when I went there, it was like we wanted to work there. I had a partner in a small company. I mean, a starving company is what we were doing out of his garage. And this is something to be remembered for younger people, which everybody here is younger, is when we were told what the salary would be, we didn't plan this, but we paused and said, well, our shop rate is actually more than that. And they went, In reality, just like anybody that's a small company, your shop rate is not what you get. But anyway, it was something to say. And then they said, eventually they went and talked to the money people and said, came back and said, yeah, we'll pay you that. Because we were more knowledgeable than they were. I worked, and my friend had worked in industrial design. And so they came back and told us that would be the salary. So we started right away. And the person who was my boss, about 3 days later, said, when we were alone somewhere, he said, when you arrived, that was the best day of my life. And I said, boy, what do you mean the best day of your life? And he said, well, they nearly doubled my salary. They have again this salary, because they couldn't have the boss making less money. So it was a win-win situation. But we knew we didn't know it would be a multi-million-dollar movie, but even at that time, say it cost $11 million to make it, the whole thing, and so if it made $25 million, that would be considered an incredible success. Pump your $11 million into something. So to go to like $450 million was just unbelievable. And I used to say that the reason that ILM was really super successful right from the get-go is that we knew how to make the golden egg that the goose laid. And not everybody knew how to make that golden egg. And it was like all of a sudden everybody wanted to make their films here in special effects because it would if you put in $20 million, you were guaranteed of getting at least $100 million out of it. You know, so anybody could see that those were good investments, and everybody wanted to do it. And so it was like we worked too much, too many hours. We used to always work 10, 11 hours, and then eventually people got older, they had kids, they wanted to have a life, and so eventually we went to 9.5, 9, blah, 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 like that, and down. So any other question? I just happened to drive by, and then I saw a Star Wars T-shirt.
You never seen a Star Wars T-shirt before?
I figured it probably had something to do with the building. Yeah.
Do you have any pieces at your house? Did you keep anything from when you worked here?
You know what? I got up this morning. I had something to do. I didn't put my hearing aids in, so I can hear you, but that's what I'm doing. I lost my hearing here. Did I keep things and all this stuff? There were, just like everybody, there's lots of stuff that went in the trash here. Somebody within the model shop was asked one time, how big do you make a model? What's the biggest? And he said, we never make them too big that they won't fit into a dumpster. there were things that just, when we did first Star Wars, we were doing desktop models. The Millennium Falcon was about that diameter, and the White Star Destroyer was about that long. So eventually, as CG came in, it was like a hand-in-glove relationship at first, and but they took all the desktop models. They could do them better than we could. Actually, we didn't necessarily better. What they did was they could then have every iteration they wanted to. They could fly it in 3 dimensions and that kind of stuff. They didn't have to necessarily set it in front of a camera and shoot it from this side and that side. So speed is a factor. So we started making bigger and bigger models and action models like the street for War of the Worlds that kind of bulges up and then goes down and comes back again. That was a big model, bigger than someone's living room, 2 living rooms. And I thought of it as in a meeting. I thought of it like I'd gone by the Target store, and have that red Target, and I thought, if we put linear actuators under all the parts, we could have the center move up first, and then the rest of it move up, then the center would collapse, and then the sides would come down. So that's how it was done. A big Target that had linear actuators, and then this very complicated thing for holding the dirt, which wasn't really dirt, but that kind of thing. So, but dude, yes, a lot of stuff got thrown away, but they're like super incidental things. But incidental things after 40 years become a big deal. Like, a little tile of a Death Star. We trashed a lot of Death Star. How can you keep, giant rooms full of it? Warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. So, save 6 of those or something like that, or something to this, which, can be quite a bit. But, I think everybody that worked at ILM had a pretty good sense of what's honest and not honest and that kind of thing. There were exceptions to it, as there is in everything. But me personally, I think I'm somewhat of a disappointment to other model makers because as soon as I quit work, I never made a model ever again. And I was more interested in architecture. I wanted to be an architect when I was out of school and all that stuff. That's what I thought I was going to be, a teacher. And the economy at the time didn't allow for that, But and including my house, I don't have posters or anything related. So if I'm talking to an all model maker crowd, they're kind of like, how did you stop?
35 years is enough.
Whereas you do something for 35 years, you're pretty much expended that creative energy on it, especially with hours and hours and Saturdays and when we first started, it was many Saturdays and long hours and all that stuff. But yeah, I love the work. I used to say that if you're in that zone and 5 or 10% of what you're doing of your work, you're really lucky. You know, just like how the intercom comes on and someone goes, Betty, you know, you barely hear what's happening because you're so concentrated on what you're doing. And with something like this, I don't know what the percentage was, but it was huge. You know, certainly more than 50%. You know, maybe not 100%, but especially what I was doing, because I was making the toys and action, and you know, was asked to do come up with ideas for stuff. Like, did anybody see Poltergeist?
Oh, yeah.
When we were sitting at the early stages, we used to sit around a table with the directors and the different people from different departments. It changed up and down. Sometimes we got our instructions on the telephone, which was awful, or the computer for me. But when we were being asked around, we had all the different pages of storyboards, and Spielberg he'd say, "This looks like a map painting. What do you think you're going to do here?" Or "This seems like a model," or "This seems like an action shot." And